Det är inte det hela. Psykiska störningar röstas inte bara in i DSM, utan då och då röstas de också ut. Ta till exempel homosexualitet, som fanns med i DSM 1 och 2 som en psykisk sjukdom. Så här förklarar chefredaktören för DSM 3, Robert Spitzer, det hela.
I came up with a definition in 1973 that made it possible to argue that homosexuality was not a mental disorder.
On a vote, essentially, at a conference of the American Psychiatric Association, it was removed.
Now, did they discover that homosexuality was not a disease through scientific processes? No. It was included for political reasons, and it was removed for political reasons.
And the end result is a vote. It's a supposed democracy. So to call it science is a complete fabrication.
Så DSM är egentligen politisk, inte vetenskaplig?
Just det.
Jag trodde att psykiatriker ville framstå som läkare.
Korrekt. Det var därför de fick se till att deras handbok verkade mycket mer vetenskaplig.
Vilket den inte var. Vad gjorde de då?
Jo, de bestämde sig för att nästa utgåva av DSM skulle se helt annorlunda ut. Det var ett beslut som skulle förändra psykiatrin för all framtid.
If you roll the clock forward to the 1970s in the United States, basically at that time psychiatry was in very poor shape for a number of reasons. First of all, it was held in very low regard by other members of the medical profession. So psychiatry was the sort of thing you did if you couldn't succeed in any other area of medicine.
And people such as Robert Spitzer in America made it very clear that the time had come essentially for psychiatrists, being doctors of medicine, to practice medicine. So if a psychiatrist was spending a lot of time dealing with people who were anxious, depressed, these dilemmas, these problems in living now essentially had to be redefined, and they were redefined as medical conditions.
And their solution to this was to come up with a manual which defined psychiatric disorders more carefully. So hence we have DSM-3, which is the third edition, which is published in 1980.
De psykiatriker som redigerade DSM-3 under Spitzers ledning gjorde sig av med freudiansk psykologi och beslöt att från och med nu skulle psykiatrins diagnoser helt och hållet vara biologiska.
Så de blev vetenskapliga?
Nej, faktiskt inte alls. Faktum är att det politiska käbbel som uppstod om vilka störningar man borde ta med eller utelämna i DSM-3 var ännu mer skrattretande. Det här var vad en psykiatriker hade att säga om det.
They would squeeze into a room which was about half the size of this one. It was much too small. And Bob would raise a provocative question and people would shout out their opinions from all sides of the room. And whoever shouted loudest tended to be heard. My own impression is it was more like a tobacco auction than a sort of conference.
Och det här är vad en annan panelmedlem hade att säga om de beslut som fattades om DSM.
The low level of intellectual effort was shocking. Diagnoses were developed by majority vote on the level we would use to choose a restaurant. You feel like Italian, I feel like Chinese, so let's go to a cafeteria. Then it's typed into the computer. It may reflect on our naivete, but it was our belief that there would be an attempt to look at things scientifically.
Det låter som att de hade en diagnostisk handbok som verkade mer vetenskaplig men som inte innehöll mer vetenskap än förr.
Samtidigt svällde DSM-3s omfång till 259 psykiska störningar. Men för att övertyga andra om att psykiatrin var sann läkarkonst blev de tvungna att vinkla den med en övertygande och skenbart vetenskaplig teori.
But with DSM-3 from 1980 on, there was the progressive medicalization of psychiatry. And the notion of chemical imbalance was invented and essentially took hold.
Vänta lite, kemisk obalans?
Teorin om kemisk obalans. Det första förslaget kom 1965 och var ett försök att förklara hur depression kanske orsakades av en obalans av vissa kemikalier i hjärnan.
Det här vill jag höra.
Joseph Schildkraut teoretiserade att eftersom psykiatriska preparat påverkar mängden av dessa kemikalier, då måste det vara så att psykiska sjukdomar kom sig av antingen för mycket eller för lite kemikalier.
Men är inte det bakvänt?
Det är det verkligen. Det är som att säga att eftersom aspirin lindrar huvudvärk så måste huvudvärk komma sig av brist på aspirin.
Jag förstår vad du menar.
Men det var precis tillräckligt övertygande för att ge psykiatriker och DSM-3 sken av vetenskap. Som Robert Spitzer uttryckte det.
Psychiatry felt now, gee, we're more scientific, we're part of medicine.
Så det fungerar nu.
Ja, och allt sedan dess har psykiatriker och läkemedelsindustrin oförtröttligt gjort reklam för teorin om kemisk obalans, både till läkarkåren och allmänheten.
If you're one of the millions of people who live with uncontrollable worry, anxiety, and several of these symptoms for 6 months or more, you could be suffering from generalized anxiety disorder, and a chemical imbalance could be to blame.
Prestige is thought to work by affecting the levels of 2 chemicals in the brain.
It works to correct chemical imbalances in the brain, which may be related to symptoms of social anxiety disorder.
Cymbalta works on serotonin and norepinephrine.
Hundreds of thousands of patients have been prescribed Abilify. Ask your doctor.
Ask your doctor.
Talk to your doctor. Call your doctor.
Ask your doctor about Cymbalta.
Prestige is a key in helping to treat my depression. Ask your doctor about Prestige.
You come to my office and I say to you, well, you describe what's going on in your life and your symptoms, and I say, well, it's clear to me that you've got a chemical imbalance and we're going to write you a prescription for this. The truth of the matter is there's no such thing as a chemical imbalance.
There's no test out there that they can depend on that tells you have a chemical imbalance.
There's actually, in fact, dozens of studies showing that there isn't any measurable imbalance. So psychiatrists will explain to patients all the time, this is just like diabetes. In diabetes, you have low insulin, we have to readjust the insulin level. In depression, you have low serotonin, we have to readjust the serotonin level. But actually, we have already proven that there's nothing wrong with serotonin levels. It's completely a myth, disproven by our own evidence.
I had a psychiatrist. He said that, in his professional opinion, this child had ADHD, a chemical imbalance of the brain. And when he was questioned on the witness stand as an expert witness for the state, he was asked if they had done an MRI. He said no. He was questioned if they had done a CAT scan. He said no. He was asked if they had done any bodily fluid check known to medical science to prove that this child had a chemical imbalance of the brain. He says no. And when he was asked how he arrived at this ADHD diagnosis, a chemical imbalance of the brain, it came down to that he had counseled and observed this child for 2 hours, and half of the time was observing. How do you arrive at a diagnosis of a chemical imbalance of the brain by talking to a child and observing them for 2 hours? You don't. Okay? It's pure guesswork.
Otroligt, är det här sant?
Se efter själv. Det här är vad som hände när en person med dold kamera besökte flera olika psykiatriker och bad dem att testas för psykisk sjukdom.
Of any scientific test?
Not that I'm prepared to do this time.
So you getting that I have adjustment, or what is it?
Adjustment disorder, mixed emotion, it just means situational stress.
Right,
it's a formal diagnosis.
But I'm saying, just where do you get that from?
I take you at face value.
In terms of diagnosis, there's no way that I can x-ray or project or
so it's very hard to have anything to measure, because whatever's going wrong, it's happening in there, and we just can't go in and open up, somebody's skull and scoop something out to measure.
Right now, we don't have an X-ray or blood test. That doesn't mean that the diagnosis is not clear.
The diagnosis for insurance, and I'm not really trying to think too much in terms of diagnosis. I don't really see that as my main job here to make the diagnosis, except to give something to the insurance that's reasonably accurate.
But we don't even really know what's going wrong in the brain. So all the things that we found were found by accident.
Jag är förbluffad. Psykiatrisk diagnos grundar sig helt och fullt på personliga åsikter.
Oavsett vad de gör har de fel. BBC gjorde till och med ett program där 10 frivilliga, varav 5 ansågs vara normala och 5 tidigare hade diagnostiserats som psykiskt sjuka, observerades av 3 välkända experter inom mentalvården som fick i uppgift att fastställa vilka som var vilka.
Oj, oj.
Kolla på det här.
We think that it's likely that you've had a history of bipolar disorder. Is that correct?
You're wrong.
Okay.
We've come to the conclusion that at some time you've been diagnosed with a mood disorder.
You're wrong.
We were wondering whether at some point in your life maybe that you had suffered from a significant psychiatric problem of some kind or other.
No.
Not at all?
You are wrong.
All right, okay.
3 wrong diagnoses in a row. After a whole week of observation, the panel have identified just 2 out of 5 disorders.
Inte mycket till vetenskap.
Verkligen inte.